Parents called me a failure for not becoming a doctor. "You're clearly embarrassing the family," they said. I quietly got up and walked out. 2 years later, they begged me to. I still remember the taste of the tea that day. Bitter. Oversteeped. My mother always made it too strong, like she thought drowning the leaves would make them obedient. It was our weekly family gathering, one of those Sundays where my parents performed the ritual of pretending everything was perfect. Smiles stretched too tight, laughter timed like a sitcom cue. And then my father asked, "So how are classes? Are you shadowing anyone yet?" That was the crack in the glass. Because I wasn't in med school anymore. I had dropped out 2 weeks earlier. Quietly. No announcement. No fanfare. Just a clean break and a racing heart. It wasn't impulsive. I had spent nights staring at the ceiling, questioning everything. My entire life had been a checklist written by someone else. Doctor. Respect. Stability. I'd followed every rule. I gave up painting when I was 12 because artists starve. I stopped hanging out with my best friend Lucas in high school because he lacked ambition. I missed birthdays, concerts, sleep, and my own sense of self chasing a title I didn't even want. But that afternoon, when they asked, I had to tell them. "I'm not going back to med school," I said, my voice low but steady. Silence. Then my mother's face hardened. "What do you mean?" "I've withdrawn. I'm working on a startup idea, something I actually care about." My Uncle Mark, halfway through a bite of samosa, paused mid-chew. My father set down his teacup with a sharp clink. And then it came, my mother's voice cold and sharp enough to cut steel. "You're clearly embarrassing the family." She said it like it was a diagnosis. No rage. Just clinical disappointment. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just stood up, slid the chair back slowly, and walked out. Not just from the living room, but from my family's story. I disappeared. No calls. No holidays. No explanations. And for the next 2 years, I built something they never saw coming. The first night away from them, I slept on a mattress on the floor of a shared apartment with no curtains and peeling paint. It was miles from the life I'd known, no polished hardwood floors, no preheated oven dinners, no framed certificates on the wall reminding me of who I was supposed to be. I felt empty. Free. Terrified. I got a job delivering groceries during the day and coded at night. It wasn't glamorous. My laptop was secondhand, the fan wheezed louder than my doubts some nights. But for the first time, I wasn't doing it for grades or praise or to make someone proud. I was building a platform, an AI-based scheduling tool for small businesses. Unoriginal, maybe. But mine. I failed. A lot. My first MVP crashed within minutes. My first cold emails got left unread. I pitched a few local businesses in person and got laughed out of a barbershop once. I didn't even have a pitch deck. I just had hunger. The kind that you feel when you've burned the bridge behind you, and the only way forward is through the fire. I didn't hear from my parents during that first year. Not a word. But the silence, it stopped hurting eventually. I started to understand that my worth didn't have to come from their approval. That love shouldn't be conditional. That maybe, just maybe, I could redefine what success looked like. Then, one morning, I woke up to 800 new notifications. My tool, SimpleShift, had gone viral. It started with a tweet. Some mid-tier influencer, someone I'd never heard of, had posted a screenshot of SimpleShift with the caption, "Finally, a scheduling app that doesn't suck." It got retweeted 12 times in the first hour. Then 400. Then thousands. By noon, my server was down. By nightfall, I had emails from angel investors, small business owners, even a venture firm in San Francisco asking if I was open to conversation. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't even have a real company name on paper yet. But I knew enough to keep my head. I rebuilt the backend overnight, spun up new servers, and slept for 2 hours in a hoodie I hadn't washed in 3 weeks. The growth was dizzying. I hired 2 freelancers to help. Then a UX designer from Berlin who slid into my DMs after seeing the buzz on Reddit. By month 3, We had 25,000 users. Month 6? We were pushing 100,000 and featured in Tech Today's startups to watch. I still hadn't told my parents. Not out of spite. I just didn't need to. That old itch, to prove myself to them, had stopped nagging. I was doing this for me now. Until one morning, I checked my inbox and saw it. Subject line from Mom. The subject line just sat there. From Mom. No emojis. No exclamation points. Just plain, clinical font, like her voice when she was disappointed. I didn't open it for 2 days. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I was afraid of what it might make me feel. For 2 years I had buried the boy who used to ache for their approval. The one who stayed up memorizing anatomy flashcards while his friends went to movies. The one who once stood in front of a bathroom mirror rehearsing the perfect sentence to ask permission to join an art class, and never asked. But eventually, curiosity cracked the door. "Hi, Nathan. Your father and I saw your name on the news. I didn't realize things had gotten so far along. I know we've had our differences, but we'd like to talk. Maybe you could come for dinner next week? Just us. No drama. Love. Mom." No apology. No. We were wrong. Just a polite attempt to re-enter the orbit. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I scrolled. And there they were. A dozen Facebook posts from distant relatives. Cousin Linda sharing the Tech Today article. Our very own Nathan making waves. Proud family moment. Uncle Ray commenting. Always knew he had it in him. Lies wrapped in digital confetti. The same people who had stared at me 2 years ago, mouths agape as my father barked. "You're embarrassing the family," in front of 20 relatives. Now suddenly they were fans. That night, I stared at my apartment window. The skyline was different now. Bigger. My new place overlooked the river. Glass walls. Hardwood floors. Silence that cost $7,800 a month. But I didn't feel satisfied. Not yet. So I hit reply. Dinner sounds good. Sunday works. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because I wanted a moment to sit in the driveway and breathe. The same cracked concrete, the same rusted mailbox, the same overgrown hedge that I used to trim every Saturday before I got too busy with myself. As my father once said, nothing had changed, except me. The porch light flicked on as I stepped out of the car. My mother opened the door like she'd just been vacuuming, trying to act normal. She smiled too quickly. "Nathan," she said, like saying my name gave her permission to feel proud again. Inside, the house was staged like it was hosting a reconciliation. Everything was too clean. Candles lit. The good dishes. Music softly playing in the background. Dad was already seated at the table, arms crossed like he had just finished an interrogation and decided to be merciful. "Nathan," he nodded. Not a hug. Not a handshake. Just that word again, like a placeholder for something he couldn't say. Dinner was awkward. Chatter about extended family. About a cousin's new baby. A joke about politics. No mention of the startup, or the headlines, or the fact that my company had just landed its second round of funding. It was like they wanted to pretend the last 2 years were a bad weather pattern we all silently agreed to forget. Halfway through the meal, I set my fork down. "I read your Facebook posts," I said, looking at my mother. "The ones about how proud you were." She blinked, caught. "Well, I mean, we are. Of course we are." My father cleared his throat. "We may have been harsh back then. But you have to understand, Nathan, we just wanted what was best for you." I laughed, quietly. "No. You wanted what was safest. What looked good to your friends. You never asked what I wanted. You told me what to be." Mom's voice shook. "We were scared, Nathan. You had everything laid out for you. Med school, a secure future. You threw it away." I leaned forward. "I didn't throw it away. I traded it. For something real. For something that's mine." Silence. Then Dad spoke again, his voice suddenly softer. "We made mistakes. We know that now. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. My briefcase was sitting by the counter, untouched. I unzipped it slowly and pulled out a black folder. Inside was a neatly printed prospectus. The cover read, Simple Shift Technologies, Series B Investor Packet. I placed it on the table in front of them. Take a look, I said. This is what I built when I was embarrassing the family. This is what happened when I stopped living for your expectations. My mother opened it and stared. Numbers. Charts. Press mentions. Revenue graphs that climbed like a mountain. My father didn't touch it. His eyes didn't leave my face. I leaned against the doorway, arms folded. You want back in. And I get that. But I'm not doing this because I need your apology. I'm doing it so you understand exactly what you lost when you turned your back on me. They both looked up. And that's when I said it, calmly, without cruelty, just truth. You chose pride over love. Reputation over your own son. And now that the world claps for me, you want to clap too. My voice didn't shake. Not once. I forgive you. But I'm not coming back. And then I turned and walked out, again. But this time, it wasn't in shame. It was in power. The door clicked shut behind me, and I didn't look back. Not at the faces frozen in disbelief. Not at the house I once memorized down to every creaking floorboard. I just walked. Down the steps, past the porch, into the cool night that felt suddenly lighter. For the first time in years, there was no ache in my chest. No weight pulling me to explain myself. No inner voice whispering, maybe they're right. The silence after walking out was different this time. Not hollow, but clean. Final. A kind of peace that only comes when you've stopped waiting for an apology that was never going to come in the form you hoped. When I got back to my condo, the skyline blinked at me through the glass. My phone buzzed. One missed call from Mom. No message. Just the empty ring. I muted it and placed the phone face down. I sat alone in the living room. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the muffled sound of traffic below. I thought I might cry, but I didn't. Not out of pride. But because I'd already done all my grieving years ago. This wasn't loss. This was letting go. Later that night, an email came through. Short. From my father. Nathan. I wish I had handled things differently. I'm sorry we made you feel like you were never enough. You were. You are. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I didn't tell anyone what happened at dinner. Not my co-founder, not my therapist, not even Lucas, the friend I'd let drift away back in college when the weight of medical expectations made me cut everything soft from my life. But something about that night rippled through me. For months, I'd been grinding through success like it was a mountain I didn't deserve to stand on. Even when SimpleShift crossed 500,000 users, even when we signed our first $1 million contract, even when I was invited to speak at a tech summit, I still felt like I was wearing someone else's jacket. It looked good on the outside but didn't fit right on the inside. That dinner changed it. I finally stopped asking myself if I was enough. I started painting again. Quietly, at night, after meetings. I pulled out a dusty old sketchbook and set up a corner of my apartment with a tiny easel and a lamp that hummed when it got too hot. I didn't paint for social media or charity auctions. Just for me. Just to remember the version of myself I used to keep hidden in drawers. I also reached out to Lucas. I had ghosted him back in our junior year. No real reason, just shame. Shame that he was living his life freely, building strange, beautiful sculptures out of scrap metal, while I memorized the Krebs cycle and pretended it mattered more than it did. I found his number, texted him. Hey man. I owe you an explanation. You free for coffee? He was. And he forgave me. We talked for 3 hours that Saturday, about failure, about family, about how many versions of ourselves we killed trying to fit into roles that don't want us. Lucas had never resented me. He just assumed I needed space. That conversation did more for me than any therapy session ever had. I started seeing my life as mine again. Not a reaction to my parents. Not a rebellion. Just mine. And yet, As the seasons turned and Simple Shift kept growing, the emails from my parents became more frequent. Then texts. Small updates. Hope you're well. Saw your interview in Business Weekly. We miss you. But they never pushed too hard. I think they understood, finally, that they no longer held the pen to my story. That access to my life was now something earned, not entitled. And that was the real turning point. The invitation came tucked in a thick cream envelope with gold foil trim, like something out of a wedding catalog. I almost didn't open it. The name on the return address was unmistakable, the Sharmas. My parents. I hadn't seen them written like that in years. Not on paper. Not with ceremony. Inside was an invitation to my cousin Priya's engagement party. Big event. Country club. Full family expected. The kind of gathering I used to be dragged to wearing stiff collars and a pasted-on smile. The note inside was handwritten by my mother. Nathan. We'd love for you to come. It would mean a lot to the family. No expectations, just your presence. Love. Mom. I held the envelope in my hand for a long time. I could almost hear the undercurrent behind the script. It wasn't just an invite to a party. It was an olive branch. Maybe even a stage. The last time I had faced the whole family, I walked out to the sound of clinking forks and stunned silence. Now I knew exactly what they wanted, a redemption arc, something neat and flattering. Look how well he turned out. Look at what we always knew he could be. They wanted to rewrite the past, not face it. But I didn't throw the envelope away. Instead, I showed up. I arrived late on purpose. The parking lot was full of Teslas and luxury SUVs. Inside, music played softly beneath the murmur of designer shoes and gossip in hushed tones. I walked in wearing the same black turtleneck I'd worn during my company's first investor pitch. No tie. No fanfare. My parents spotted me before I even reached the food tables. My mother's eyes widened. My father stood up too quickly. A wave of attention rippled across the room, like a breeze moving through tall grass. People whispered. Eyes darted. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years leaned in and smiled like we were lifelong friends. My aunt hugged me like I'd just returned from war. But I wasn't here for any of them. I sat at my parents' table. The room hushed, just a bit. My father cleared his throat. We're glad you came, he said. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in years. He looked older. Smaller somehow. The man who once loomed over my life like a granite statue now looked like someone gently being eroded by time and quiet regret. I didn't come here to be shown off, I said. My voice was steady. Calm. I came here to see if you've actually changed. My mother's hands fluttered over her napkin. Nathan, I raised a hand, and she stopped. I don't need a speech. I don't want applause. What I want is honesty. My father's eyes searched mine. And for a moment, the bravado fell away. I saw the weight in his gaze. The pride. The shame. The complicated, messy mixture of both. We lost you, he said quietly. And we deserve to. It was the first real thing he'd said to me in a decade. And maybe it was enough. Or maybe not. Because I stood up, looked around the room full of people who once called me a failure behind polite smiles, and said loud enough for them all to hear. I didn't need to become a doctor to make something meaningful. I didn't need to wear a white coat to be worthy of love. I just needed to stop waiting for permission. And then, for the second time in my life, I walked away from my family. But this time, I wasn't leaving in pain. This time, I was reclaiming my place, not as their son, but as my own man. I didn't go straight home that night. Instead, I drove to the edge of the city, the part where the skyline gives way to long stretches of dark road and old memories. I parked near the lake I used to visit as a kid, back when everything in my world was framed by expectation and quiet obedience. The water was still. The kind of still that mirrors you back with uncomfortable accuracy. I sat on the hood of my car, jacket zipped up to the neck, watching the ripples. I thought about all the versions of me that had existed over the years. The boy who used to win spelling bees and smile too wide, hoping his parents would finally say, "We're proud of you," without adding a "but." The teenager who would scribble comic panels in the margins of his bio notes, then rip them out in guilt. The young man who got the acceptance letter to med school and didn't celebrate, just exhaled like someone who had been holding his breath for years. And I thought about the man I'd become now. Not polished. Not perfect. But real. A man who had failed and flailed and started again. Who had built something not just successful, but authentic. Who had walked into a room full of relatives who once pitied him and left them silent, not with anger, but with clarity. I checked my phone. One message. From my father. "I don't expect a response. Just want you to know, we're trying. For real this time." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty. But because some words don't need echoes. Some moments are better left suspended in the space between recognition and redemption. Later that week, my mother showed up at my office unannounced. She looked out of place among the glass walls and white boards. Her coat was too heavy, her hands clasped too tightly. She didn't sit when I offered. Just stood there, blinking. "I wanted to see it," she said. "Where you work. What you made." I nodded, saying nothing. She walked slowly around the room, eyes grazing over the team photos, the framed article from Forbes, the scribbled wireframes on the wall. Her lips trembled. "I didn't understand," she whispered. "What it cost you. What we did to you." I finally spoke. "You didn't just push me to be something I wasn't. You made me feel like who I was didn't exist unless it fit your story." She closed her eyes. "I'm sorry." I studied her face. The regret was real. But so was the distance. She could see my world now, but she couldn't unlive the years when she refused to. "I forgive you," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I let you back in all the way." She nodded. One tear fell. Just one. And then she left. Not with a hug. Not with a dramatic plea. Just a quiet walk down the hallway, like she understood that healing doesn't always come with reconciliation. Sometimes it comes with boundaries. That night, I went back to my studio. I painted until 2 a.m., a skyline, blurred at the edges. Half city. Half fire. All of it mine. I no longer look back with bitterness. I look back with understanding. My parents weren't villains. They were scared people clinging to a narrow definition of success, one that had been burned into them by their own hardships. But fear disguised as love still burns. What I've learned is this: you can love your family and still walk away. You can forgive them and still protect your peace. I don't hate them. I just don't orbit around them anymore. These days, when people ask how I did it, how I went from near dropout to entrepreneur, I tell them it started the moment I stopped asking for permission. And if there's anyone listening who feels trapped under the weight of expectation, hear this. You don't have to prove your worth by becoming someone else's dream. You're allowed to be the author of your own story. Just make sure, when you finally walk out that door, it's toward you.